What's up, Flip Factor family? This is Michael Green with the Flip Factor Podcast, the #1 podcast dedicated to teaching you how to find and win high-profit flips that make you more money so you have the freedom to do whatever the F you want. Today, we're talking about financial freedom through real estate with investing in Ola Dantis. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Mike. I really appreciate you having me on your show. Thank you.
I'm very excited to have Ola on. We were just talking about this a few seconds ago. First multifamily person on. It's one of the hottest things going right now. I cannot believe that somehow I haven't had someone with multifamily. Also happens from Maryland, so that's pretty cool. I'm very, very happy to have you. So we're talking about relevant. Yep. So Ola, welcome. And, tell us a little bit about how you got into real estate, multifamily, and a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Ola Dantis. Thank you again, Mike, for having me on your show. I was actually born in Nigeria, West Africa. Some people might know that. Some people might not know where Nigeria is. You might have got an email from a prince sometime in the past.
I have.
That's an interesting joke. But I also lived in the UK for a bit. Now I'm in the US, obviously. We've been here for about 5 years, we as in my wife and I. You asked about what got me started in the real estate investing game. Basically, my wife and I, we were, living the dream, the American dream. We had a cute 1-bedroom luxury apartment in a place called Columbia, Maryland, essentially suburbia of Maryland. Never had to worry about parking. Never ever have to worry about what property taxes were. Never had to worry about water bill. Yeah, I'm going to get to that in a bit. But there was something missing, right? I felt like in my life, I felt like I could be doing more with my life. It was kind of like going to work, come home, eat, sleep, go to work, come home, eat, sleep. And it was kind of like, there's gotta be something else out there, but I didn't know what that was. Kind of out of the blue, I would say a friend of mine who has a real estate investing company in London called me and say, "Hey, Ola, can you, jump on the plane and meet me in Dubai? I've got to meet some investors for my business and I need help with you to help me analyze my business and help me a little bit." So I did what every wise man does. I prayed about it and I spoke to my wife. And, of course, my wife was, unsurprisingly, she was like, "Well, why don't you guys just Skype, FaceTime? Why do you have to go all the way there?" I was like, well, what if I go there and I actually learn something, maybe that could help our family. So maybe I should. So anyway, a little bit of back and forth. When you think about Dubai, you think about the glitz and the glamour kind of associated with that part of the world. But really, I just, landed in Dubai, went to a pretty standard hotel. We were there for about, 3 days, just kind of masterminding on my friend's business. And I got to realize, wow, like this guy's doing well. He's making so much money. So we did that for about 3 days. Obviously, on my way back home on the plane, I was like, I could do this in America. I mean, a much larger, market, I could do this. Obviously, I didn't know what I was going to do. But when I got back, I started reading a ton, listening to podcasts, great podcasts like yours, Mike. And I was just learning and learning and learning. And this same book called Rich Dad Poor Dad kept coming up, right? It was just a theme. So obviously I picked up the book. I just got like backslapped, right, into reality, into what I now call the awokeness phase, right? Like, oh my God, this is everything I've been thinking of, but I couldn't really articulate. I couldn't really like talk about it. But like this is what I mean. Like I get paid and I give it back to these people that collect rent from me. Like now I'm those people collecting rent, by the way. But back then, I couldn't really figure that out. So obviously I narrowed down to small multifamily. So I think within 3 to 6 months we actually bought our first property, which was a duplex in Baltimore, a Class A area of Baltimore. And as they say, the history is now being made. So I'm gonna stop there. But real quickly, actually, before I stop, the reason I mentioned the park and the property taxes and water bill is, don't forget, we were living a really comfortable life, right? A lot of people live that life every single day in America and they have no issues with it. And I don't either. I just do with my life. But when I bought the duplex, I had to find parking every day after work. I could never find parking. I have to turn around. This is an Upper Phelps Point. Anybody that knows Baltimore very well. I could never, ever find parking on time, right? When I go shopping, I'd have to carry stuff, carry the baby chair from the car. It was not nice. I have to worry about water bill. I have to worry about taxes. I have to worry about stuff breaking because I have a house now, right? But just months before, I didn't have that responsibility. So I was comfortable. Now I was getting a little bit uncomfortable. But I realized that this discomfort is just for now, for me to have a much better future in retirement. Sometimes it's okay to get uncomfortable with intention of being comfortable when others get uncomfortable, right? It's okay to defer your comfortability, right? And when you're past that retirement age, you can know you can relax and really, enjoy that financial freedom as opposed to being a greeter in Walmart, for example. Not really what I'm aspiring to be. No.
Well, it doesn't take much to do that, right? Exactly. So it's not going to take a lot of risk, or you don't have to get out of your comfort zone to be a greeter. Well, I probably would have to get out of my comfort zone to be a greeter at Walmart, but not most don't. But you talk about something that's really interesting. If you're not from Baltimore, you wouldn't know. But if you are from a bigger city and the parking's crazy, we call it sharking, and it's always really crazy when you ride around. It's like you're in the FBI, and you're looking like, did that car light just come on? And you're like 6 miles in advance, or you have hyper focus because you think that car, you don't know if they're pulling in or pulling out. And it's crazy because you're just hoping to get something within a block of your house. And that's not too bad in the summer, but I feel like it gets incredibly worse in the winter when it's like 2 degrees out. You're carrying those groceries, you're carrying the baby carriage, and it's freezing. And I'm so city, obviously, if you have parking at your house, it's a huge value, and it's
of course
it's actually really desirable. Very much, I want to move back to the city, but the one caveat would be that I'd have parking, because when I lived in the city about 10 years ago, not in as nice of a part like Upper Fells Point and all that, parking was crazy. I literally almost got in a fist fight with one of my neighbors over parking, because I literally just like moved my car, and the guy came out in his underwear and jumped in my spot like 11 o'clock at night. And I was like, dude, it's not, you only moved like 10 feet. It was just nuts that they so badly wanted to be in front of their house. So I didn't miss that when I moved to the county and got away from it. But now I realize I grew up in the city. I like I like the movement of the city, and the overall vibe is pretty cool. So good stuff, man. Now tell us a little bit about your first investment. You said it was a duplex in Upper Fells Point. Tell us some of the numbers or anything that might be helpful for someone who's thinking about doing something similar. Now, did you live in one unit and then rent the other?
Correct. Yeah. So, I'll start. I think we had the listing price was like $260, I think it was, but we were able to get it down to $240, got the seller to do the roof as well, which is always a big item. So yeah, we did live in the bottom floor. So it was 2 floors. Unit mix is 1 on the bottom and 2 on the top. So we already had 2 tenants, both of whom we inherited when we bought the place. So when, before we moved into the bottom floor, we actually did a bit of rehab. We got out the bathroom and replaced most of the kitchen, and then just kind of changed the flooring and painting. And that was kind of my, my real first foray into dealing with contractors, right? As you know, I like the first 3 letters of contractors,
That's funny.
Yeah, it's fascinating, right? You really get to know people, right? You need to be very aware of psychology. You need to be my street smartness really, kicked in. But anyway, the project was, I think it was for about a month. It wasn't like all guns blazing, similar to the other project I had in Baltimore, but it was pretty hands-on, and, we got that going. So we moved into that rehabbed, right, by us, my wife and I, and then we lived there for a bit. And then life happens, we had a baby, and then we moved up and then rented the bottom. Kind of to go back to the numbers and to kind of let our guest here understand. In the past, I would pay rent, right? And then when we moved in, the 2 tenants upstairs were essentially paying most of our mortgage. So I realized that, wow, okay, this is really nice. We bought it for $245, right? We rehabbed the bottom floor. When the 2 tenants moved out, when we had our baby, we basically, rehabbed the top as well, did the same exact thing we did on the bottom floor. And then shortly thereafter, we got an appraisal done. So we bought this thing for $245. And then after the appraisal was done, I think it was about 18 months after, it was appraised for $375. Right.
Wow, that's a big difference.
Yeah, it is a big difference. So, we did a lot to the exterior as well. So we did a ton of work. From a person that is starting out in real estate, I like to use this story as well. I feel like it's very impactful if I use a story. I remember we had this epiphany, my wife and I, we were at home, one typical night doing what lovers do, cooking. And I was telling my wife, I was like, baby, I really have money in my account. Unlike before, where I get paid, and then I pay rent, and then there's like a little bit left, and then I never know where it goes, and then I get paid, and I pay the rent, and there's a little bit left, but it kind of disappears every time. But now money comes into my account, into my Bank of America, and it just stays there. It just chills there. It's just there. I'm like, wow, this is new for me. And she's like, me too, right? This shift from moving from a luxury apartment to buying this duplex radically changed our financial life, and obviously woke us up like, oh my goodness, what if we did 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of these things? This could really change our lives. We could actually buy our time back from the 9 to 5 and essentially just do this full time. So that epiphany for us was actually what led us to found our company, dwelling.com. And we decided to, essentially start doing this and start buying properties as much as we can.
Tell me a little bit about your evolution. So you started out in an A-class neighborhood, but traditionally it's kind of complicated to find really good opportunities in those neighborhoods, especially every year it gets a little more competitive. Have you made a shift over the last, say, a couple years into like maybe B and C neighborhoods, or what does your portfolio look like essentially?
It's a good question. So after this deal, I started looking into kind of larger multifamily, like, 50 to 150 units. And I was kind of focusing on that. I was kind of, chugging along because these things take time. You're not going to be Grant Cardone overnight. So I kind of, I had a mentor, it was great. And then I was kind of learning that business. And then I met another partner and he's like, Ola, we could actually flip homes not far from here. And, so I got the shiny object syndrome, right? So when I got that shiny object syndrome, I decided to flip a couple of houses, not too far. I mean, it's kind of class B, right? On the border, not far from my first. I could literally walk from our first property. So basically decided to flip that. It was an okay deal. And then I decided to flip another one, which was actually not far from the first house, which was in a class A area. And it was okay too. So doing those two flips really kind of threw me off, right? In terms of focusing on large multifamily. So I actually did what you do every day, which is flipping. I didn't have the temperament for it. I went back in my lane, which is obviously multifamily. So we recently just closed on a 160 units apartment building in Houston, Texas, with some of my partners. So that's kind of what the portfolio looks like. And, to kind of go back to your question, it is tough to get deals in some really nice areas. But if you are local to that area, like meaning you live in that area, not you're like, I don't know, an hour away or you're in the same state. No, you live there. You can walk the street. You can take a walk around and start writing numbers down. You might still be able to find some deals. Yes, it's not going to be quick. It might have some hair on it, because I'm saying that because when I was living in Upper Fells Point, I was about to get a hit unit down the road from me. It was just a bad building, like the roof caved in or whatever, and the owner was just done. So you can get deals like that. So far, you're local, you're walking the area, you're reaching out to the owners. You're really, really narrow focused. You might get lucky. The harder you walk, the luckier you get.
You bring up a great point. I don't hear very many people talk about this, but the person who inspired me to get into real estate was my uncle, Steve Green. And he, back in Brooklyn, where I grew up, in Brooklyn, Maryland, by the way, not far from Inner Harbor and all that. The bad part, not Brooklyn, New York, which is pretty awesome now. He would just go around. He was a firefighter, so they have a lot of free time. He would go around pound the pavement, is what I guess they called it back then. And he would just like talk to a little old lady, and she'd be like, "Oh, I'm selling," or a lady down the street selling. And it would be interesting how he never marketed, never did anything, ended up building about 13, 14 rentals in the height around 2009. Him and his wife were considering moving to another state close to her family. He sold them all off the perfect time when everything was like top of the market, 2008 and 9, and right before it kind of fell down, and bought it in all those years, but he never did 1 ounce of marketing. He just got out, talked to people, shook hands. And I know what you're saying. So you like, if you live in the neighborhood and you're seeing things like way before anyone else, I would even go as far as saying the people I've seen do really well in the A-class neighborhoods pretty much are only doing that approach because the marketing is just falling on deaf ears and it's just too competitive when it gets to that stage. They're finding it in that very early sales cycle, the beginning sales cycle, like almost pre-sales cycle essentially. And that makes a lot of sense. So that's really good feedback. Thank you for that. So
yeah, and I got to add really quickly that there's a funeral home just pretty much adjacent from my building. It's a funeral home. I mean, who notices that stuff, right? And now it's been gutted out and it's been turned into apartments. And I've walked past that funeral home for years.
I so thought you were going to, so you're talking about taking it into multi-units. And I so thought you were going to say, well, I was by the funeral home and I was talking to the people who died and the probate leads were coming from it.
Talking to dead people.
Crying for dollars, exactly. Walking over funeral crashing and saying, sorry for your loss. What's everybody doing with the house? Is anything I can help with? Here's my card.
No, that would be a really, really interesting marketing right there.
That would be the next level that I'm not willing to go to. I'm really not ready for that yet either. So,
we're having too much fun, Michael.
Someone probably is, though, out there. And that guy's probably winning at some level. So tell me about your deals that like, what is like a big deal you're working on right now?
So right now we've got another deal we're looking at in Houston, Texas. Still very early on. We've got obviously our group of investors. I'm actually hoping to go to the city in a few weeks. Yeah. So we're just looking at that deal. With very, very hush. Obviously, we haven't got it on the contract yet. It's an off-market deal. So we're really excited about that. It's kind of like, when you get your feet on the ground, you just kind of keep going and keep going. So we're super excited about that. We're just going to keep doing that. We do have some investors closer to that market as well. So that's really exciting. So we're just really excited. We can't complain.
As you started to grow, did you just start figuring, okay, like there's so much in Baltimore, but with expanding out, there's some markets that are more conducive for buying like, 50 and 100 units than maybe. See, from my opinion in Baltimore, living here my whole life and growing up is the joke that I'll usually say is when you start to get anything, it's like 50 or 100 units in Baltimore, minus like the A class, which would just be very high level development. It's kind of becomes like, the Nino, what is like Nino Brown in the Carter, New Jack City. It's an old drug movie, but basically they were selling crack out of there and it was just like completely scary. And that's what Baltimore has. It's like you can't put a bunch of people in a building without there's some stuff going down. And I grew up in the projects, so I know. And back when I was growing up, we had those buildings, but they essentially kind of knocked them all down in Baltimore because they were just creating so many problems. Now, they can manage things that are like 2 levels, but when it was like 10 levels, it is not able to keep it under control essentially. So I wonder, how many like, it's probably just very few, like 50 and 100 units. I mean, I'm saying this obviously with zero knowledge of that being the case and more asking your opinion on it.
Yeah, it's fascinating you brought that up. I love Baltimore City. It's been great to me personally, to my family, to my awareness as an investor. However, though, when I speak to, investors from, say, California, they're like, oh, Ola, what's going on in Baltimore? And they're asking me, in a very stylish way, like, you had the riots there. Like, I don't know if I want to invest there, So that is my reality. And that's why we went to Texas because, investors like the DFW, they're like Phoenix, Arizona, Texas for the most part, Florida, so that's why we have to pivot, dwelling at a pivot as a company and started looking because our investors just didn't have that appetite, for the city of Baltimore. And that's kind of why we're a little bit stalled as well, apart from my shiny object syndrome. So you're definitely right. I have seen some buildings, some smaller multis that we're going to take down. And, after touring the buildings, we're like, this is just not for us.
Yeah, because you notice a lot of them are available in areas that you're like, I don't know about that. Might be like more of a D neighborhood and kind of getting past where we want to be. And I realized that. So you're putting like together really big deals. It makes total sense when you're putting a big deal together that you're going to need someone, you're going to need a city that's sexy and everyone wants to be in. And
Correct.
Unfortunately, that makes total sense. In Baltimore, we've not got the best rap, even though you're right. We are a great city. If you're from Baltimore, the harbor, we have so much amazing stuff going on. I would say we might be one of the better investment cities for flipping small multi-units, 2 to 4 units.
Absolutely.
I know a lot of people that have 400 and 500 individual units. So if you want to build stuff like that, we just have a lot of great opportunity in Baltimore. It's very exciting here, but I can see where you start talking really big development. It almost would have to go to the counties outside. And now you're just in a pool that's just so small. Yeah, it makes sense you would be stretching out. I always wondered that. Me and Ola were talking pre-podcast a little bit about, staying in our lane, staying focused. So he was talking about going out of his lane with flipping. And I have taken a couple commercial boot camps thinking about doing multi-unit and literally got pretty deep into it and didn't pull the trigger because like every time I realized it's like, this is a full-time, like, investing in multifamilies. If it's your thing, you got to commit to it. Like anything in life, you got to get great at it. I don't think there's such thing as being great at wholesaling, rehabbing, lease options, rentals, multi-units. You really have to take one thing and become the master of it. And I love when he was like, the rehabs were distracting for me. Well, multi-units are distracting for me because people say, Mike, you don't like multi-units? I love multi-units. However, I've taken like 10 years to get great at flipping. And I kind of like at that place now where there's some amazing stuff happening. And I feel like it's the payoff, right? We work really hard to get good at something. So we have that payoff. This would be an awful time to stop flipping and stop collecting the payoff of what I've worked for. Right?
Yeah. And there's a price to pay. Right? If you do that, right? If you stop flipping and you try to do this multi stuff, there's a price, right? And there's no discount, by the way, for that price.
There's not just long. You got to work at it, right? You got to go through the school of hard knocks. I mean, you obviously can get a mentor, someone to expedite a little bit, but still gonna, nothing's easy. Still got to deal with contractors and raising money. Oh, great question. Actually, one of the things I was thinking earlier when you're speaking, talk about the money piece of this, because I know when I think of it, the first problem in my head is like, well, I obviously know I'd be able to find them with years of marketing experience and negotiation. But where would the money come from? Talk a little bit about how you put the money together on some of your deals.
Syndication, apartment syndication sounds very complex, right? Sounds like almost like a chemical. But apartment syndication is essentially where you coalesce with investors, right? You all come together, right? A real life example I love to give is if you're trying to get a flight, from here to California, you don't pick up your phone and call Southwest or Spirit and say, hey, can you grab me from my house and take me to California? No, you essentially buy a ticket with 300 other people and you essentially pay for this plane from BWI or wherever to California, right? It's the same exact thing. I can't go and buy $11.5 million apartment because I'm not a Saudi prince. Even a Saudi prince would still need a team of people anyway. So you basically, coalesce and syndicate, getting 50 or 100,000 from different investors, right? And then, parlay and deploy that capital to take down that big asset. Especially for us though, us meaning we have an apartment syndication group. So we all kind of come together anyway, and everybody has their different strengths, and we kind of come together. And pretty much that's what most people do. Even Grant Cardone, everybody just kind of comes together, just get money from different people and just take down this big assets. Now,
No, it makes total sense. Is there a limit to where you think it makes sense to do that? So if it was a 2 or 4 unit, would that be something you would self-finance or do something a little differently with?
Yeah, I mean, for the small multifamily stuff, it just wouldn't be worth your time. Now, if you're somebody just starting fresh and you're maybe, I don't know, in your 20s, you just finished university, you have a rich uncle. Yeah, of course. And if you've obviously, I'm assuming you've learned your stuff, the fundamentals of, small multifamily. Yes. For the most part, typically you don't want to be, syndicating for a 4 unit. It's just, it's basically trying to kill a rabbit with a RPG.
You might obviously be able to just go to a bank, get a loan. And if there's some gap funding you need, just go to someone and say, hey, put 50K in, I'll give you X, whatever.
Exactly.
Right? And that's kind of what you're doing at a bigger level when you get into the big units.
Absolutely.
Okay. Awesome, man. Well, this is really good stuff. Last question. We'll jump right into a few things, but last question. Tell me what you think your biggest takeaway is. Just one single takeaway that you can give to the Flip Factor audience.
Yeah, I think a generalistic one is understand that life is all about being disciplined in anything that you want to do. Everybody always thinks, especially in our world of like social media and like self-expression, and they think like success is instant. You just see one person like, oh, this is successful. No, maybe, for example, even some of the artists we see on stage, maybe they've been singing for 15 years, living on $1,000 a month. And, somebody had like puked on the piano in a bar somewhere in Montana, like 5 years ago, and nobody knew their name. But, when they see them on the stage, they're like, oh, wow, they're so lucky, overnight success. But no, they've put in that discipline for 15 years, the small, everyday minutia, almost inconsequential things that they've done is what gets them to where they are, right? So what I want to leave people with is, whatever you're trying to achieve in your life, you're trying to flip your first house, or you're trying to flip 10 houses, or you're trying to start your journey in flipping, you need to understand that there's a method to the madness, and it usually requires some form of discipline. So make sure you've got that part really, really, really laid down before you start your journey. Because if you don't, when you get your first obstacle, you're just going to give up.
Some of the best advice I've heard in a long time. Really great feedback.
Thank you.
And 100% agree with you, by the way. Discipline is the key to all this. And anytime my business isn't doing as well as it should, it's always a discipline issue. It's never a knowledge anymore. Obviously, I've gained a lot of knowledge over the years. It's me not following my own systems. By the way, the person who follows his systems the worst is myself, because I'm the boss and I can actually not follow them. And as I get some permissions to live outside my own systems a little bit and create, then my people reel me back in to say, hey, we created, you took a lot of time to create this system. It's been tested. It works really well. And we just get back to business and everything feels better. But you said something earlier about it's like making money long term. It's like delayed financial freedom. And when you said that, I was thinking like one of the biggest things that I struggle with, and I see a lot of people who are interested in getting into business, is they definitely mistake it for being instant gratification. Mm-hmm. And it's just not. It's this compounding effect over a really long time. Mm-hmm. And flipping is closer to, obviously you can 6 months or something, you can make some money versus 6 years. But, at the end of the day, the people who are really going to own this world are people like Ola, right? And others like you, because that's the real wealth.
Oh, you're gonna make me blush. Stop it, Mike. You're going to make me blush.
Ola is very likely will be my hard money lender 10 years from now. So that's just true. I mean, it's true stuff, man. Which means that's why I've been getting into rentals lately a little bit and building some wealth myself. And, because I got a great opportunity. I do about 100 deals a year. So we always always have like opportunities to pick up a few 3 to 5 really awesome rentals every year to do awesome stuff, even though not my lane, but a little bit out of my lane. But I just, when it's a great deal, it supports the fact that I'm not amazing at it. So one last thing that I want to get from you, obviously, that you can share with the group, and it cannot be Rich Dad, Poor Dad, but give me your best book recommendation. By the way, I've recommended that book a million times. That's why I would say give us something different. It's a great book. I love it. I always wondered where my Rich Dad was. I only had the Poor Dad, by the way. I never had the Rich Dad. The Rich Dad kind of represented all my coaches. Yeah, the Rich Dad represented all the people I paid like $20K to coach me, and combination of that kind of became my Rich Dad, by the way. And that's just being in this world with a lot of cool people. So yeah, what's a great book you read, or something recently, or just think it was very influential to you?
Yeah. I'm a huge reader. I've probably done close into like 15 books this year, if not more. I don't know. I'm just like reading and reading constantly. One book that I did read this year, though, is called Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. He just really talks about, understanding your ruling principle, and just, which is basically, how you think, your philosophy. But also he mentioned something really important, which is having a benevolent disposition, right, to life, because of the ephemeral nature of life, which is just short term. Life is very transient, right? We're all going to die. And I love the fact that, he just says, knowing that we're all going to that same destination, just have a benevolent disposition, which means just be nice to people as much as you can. Just try to be nice. It doesn't matter how much fame or money that you acquire. It doesn't matter, because of the end destination, right? So having that ruling principle allows you to be a better person, have better relationships. In this case, as we're discussing, have a better business, be a better person to your kids, your wife, whatever. So that book really just struck me as, wow, like, when he talks about time, in that way, like he's basically saying, look, it doesn't matter. Even if you live to 100 years old, you're like a speck in the time continuum. Like, just think about since when time has started. So even if you live like 200 years, like you're still like a speck. So when you think of it out, you're like, wow, it doesn't matter how many followers I have on Instagram. I'm just a speck anyway. Like, it doesn't mean you become apathetic to life, but you have a better understanding of your position in life and in the time continuum. So it's fascinating to read. It's very hard to read. It's like a Bible kind of thou shalt, but very, very fascinating.
That sounds amazing. It was called Meditations by Marcus Aurelius.
Correct.
Awesome. I'll definitely check that out. That sounds like something I need to get into.
Yeah.
Cool stuff you were just talking about there. It's been great having you on the show, Ola, as usual. Really fantastic. Love to have you back in the future. Stay connected with you. You've been really awesome just talking this conversation about financial freedom, being able to get out of your job and make some money with multifamilies. You really kind of laid out some great stuff today, by the way. So thank you so much for that. If someone would like to get in touch with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, the best way for me, I used to say Instagram, but I'm spending less time there now. So I think the best place is investwithola.com. So that's investwithola.com. Best place to find me.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being on the show. And I want to thank all the Flip Factor family for listening. I know you guys, your time's super valuable. I hope that Ola really gave some great value today, because he definitely gave me some value. And I'm hoping all the listeners got some awesome stuff from him. He shared in a big way. Thank you for that, Ola. And thanks so much for being on the show. Have a great day.
My absolute pleasure. Thank you, Mike.